Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir. Thank you so much, as always, guys, for joining me here on the podcast to learn and to grow. Always appreciate all the support. And as always, I have a big request right off the top. If you get any value from this conversation or any of the other conversations, please do share it. Put a screenshot up on Instagram, tag the guest who's in it, or put a link on LinkedIn, or send a link to your friend. I don't know, call your mom, whoever it is. Let them know we're having these conversations and we're helping the profession to grow and to improve and to thrive in the future. I am really, really grateful to be here. If you're watching on YouTube, you will see this video looks very different than my usual video in my home studio. I'm sitting here at the New England College of Optometry in Boston. As I'm looking past this camera, I'm looking at the River Charles in the back, like just all sorts of nostalgia coming back to me here as I'm visiting NECO today. And I am very fortunate to be able to record a couple of podcasts. I recorded one with Dr. Howard Purcell. If you haven't seen that one, make sure you stay tuned for that. But I'm also recording this one with two lovely guests. I'm really excited to be able to speak to students here at NECO as well, to learn about NECO life, and in particular, Canadian students. So what was it like for Canadians to come down here to NECO and what the experience has been like? And I have the wonderful Nyah Miranda and Ewan Kelly here to share their experiences. They're both in third year. So why don't we start with Nyah? Tell us a little bit about yourself. And
sure. Thanks, Dr. Sian. So like you said, I'm Nyah Miranda, third year at NECO, and I'm originally from Vancouver Island, British Columbia. A fun fact about me is that I used to play field hockey in undergrad.
Awesome.
Great. Again, thanks for having us. My name's Ewan Kelly. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm a third year student at the New England College of Optometry. I did my undergrad in London, Ontario at Western, and I'm really enjoying my time in Boston so far. It's been great.
And you're also an athlete as well.
Correct. I played on the golf team for a couple of years, and trying to continue as we go.
That's awesome, man. We could take a tangent and just speak about sports this whole time. But given where we are and given that NECO has given us the space so graciously, I think we should maybe focus for now. So let's start with, you're both Canadian from opposite ends of the country. One island on the West Coast and one island. Is Halifax? Is Nova Scotia an island?
I thought it was an island too,
it's connected.
It's connected. It's almost an island.
It's pretty far.
It's all the way on the opposite end. Okay, it's close enough. I know this is terrible. I'm ignorant of maritime geography. Okay, but what I want to ask you both so far is, let's start with, why did you choose NECO of all the potential other options for optometry schools? Let's start with Nyah, especially coming all the way from the West Coast. What made you choose New England College of Optometry?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, coming from the West Coast, I really wanted to experience a different culture. So being in a city was really important to me. I was drawn to Boston for its multicultural aspects, being in a big city, having all those different opportunities. And I thought that NECO would be a good place for me because of the vast Canadian population there. I was connected with a few doctors, like in Vancouver. If you know Dr. Sunny Boular, he was a mentor to me, and he went to NECO and raved about it and said, you just get such a good clinical experience there. There's a lot of Canadians and a lot of fun to be had. So just kind of through word of mouth, I became intrigued in checking out NECO. And then I had my interview, and it was unlike any interview I had for optometry school. Like, everyone was so focused on grades or OAT scores, but NECO really cared about me as an applicant, my aspirations for becoming an optometrist. They seemed like they could really work with me to, fulfill my full potential as a doctor. So just like a bunch of aspects kind of drew me to Boston. I thought it would be a great place to get my doctorate degree.
Awesome. Very good. Very good.
I think you can say the same with me. Kind of heard through the grapevine. I worked as a tech for a couple of years back in Halifax before I decided to come to optometry school. And where Boston is quite close to Halifax geographically, there was a pretty good network of doctors back in Halifax that all had good things to say about NECO. Okay. I'd been to Boston in the past, and I really liked the city. Yeah. And again, when going through the interview process, everybody here seemed like really supportive, reaching out. If you had any questions at all, you'd hear back from them very quickly. And they just seemed like it was a good place to be, and there were people there.
That's excellent. It's interesting because you guys went through that experience 3-4 years ago. I went through that. Oh man, I actually don't want to say how long ago it was, to be honest with you, because it's been a long time, but it was almost 20 years ago that I was going through that same interview process. And I actually feel like I had the same experience going through the interview. The very interesting, I remember sitting down having a conversation. It didn't really feel like an interview, and it was more kind of a personal conversation and understanding, what my values were and what I like to do back home and that kind of thing. So very interesting that NECO still kind of takes that strategy when in interviewing. Obviously, they must be looking at the academic side as well, but they're really taking into account what other traits and values you have and that you're bringing to the school. I think that, again, going on a bit of a tangent here, but I think that's so valuable as like, what is it going to look like for the profession? If we're interviewing, yes, we need to have a certain baseline academic achievement and that level. But if we're interviewing and accepting applicants based on a well-roundedness and personality and other contributions that they'll make to the profession in the long term, I think that's better for our profession in the long term, right? If everybody comes out and is just book smart, we won't have the people who are going to be out there speaking about the profession and the charisma that we need to endorse the profession and to attract more students in the future. So good on NECO, and it certainly seems like they've picked a couple of really great candidates in you two as well. So if you don't mind me asking, and you're welcome to share as much or as little as you want, did you apply to other schools? And if so, I know you talked a little bit about why you chose NECO. Without speaking poorly of anybody, were there other things that you were looking at that made you choose NECO versus another school, perhaps, versus not just the city?
Yeah.
I'll start with you, Ewan. Sorry, go ahead.
I think, again, hearing from multiple docs back in Halifax, they seemed like NECO students came out with a lot of clinical experience when they graduated. And speaking with previous grads, they said they were very well prepared when they went back to Canada to begin practicing. And for myself, that was a big draw. I wanted to get a lot of experience and get in early. Like we got in first year and started seeing vision screenings with young patients. So I think the exposure was really, really a big part of why I chose here.
That's lovely. It's a great.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Ewan was saying too, we are in a city, so you get to see like a lot of ocular disease where you might not see in some other areas. The population in Canada, some places are quite healthy. So being in the city, you're exposed to a lot, more different cases that you might not be able to see. So I think that's one great thing about NECO too. And as well, echoing off what Ewan said, we are thrown into clinic in second year. We do vision screenings in first year. So they really tell you to go for it, but you learn on the job and it's a great opportunity. And I certainly feel a lot more prepared in the clinical aspect going into my fourth year, thanks to NECO.
Do you guys have any community health center experience yet?
Yes.
We do.
I'm at Lynn's, so it's like an hour away.
I did my stint at Dimmick for a bit.
You did, yeah. So that's where you start to get your real clinical experience. Yeah. And if you're in Lynn and you got to travel, that's all part of, I'm reminiscing. I'm sitting here, got all this nostalgia about my time here now, but when you got to take a train and then another train and then a bus, you know what I mean? Then that starts to add to some of the lessons that you're learning living in a new city and that kind of stuff. And I do remember one of the clinics, I actually don't remember where it was, but that literally was the process, right? Green line to red line to a bus or something. I can't remember what the exact process was, but your fourth year, you're going to be in a community health center as well at some point as well, I imagine, right? So you certainly do start to see a lot of disease and things like that get exposed to. So that's good. That's really good input. All right. This is a sensitive topic, I know right now because it's fresh, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts on NBEO and OEBC. Let's talk about from the beginning before, now there's been some recent changes. I'm not sure how much that really affected you, Ewan, but we'll get into that. But just to quickly set the scene here, in March, British Columbia and Ontario colleges both announced that they're no longer taking NBEO as equivalent to the Canadian board exam. So let's start with when you applied to NECO, when you started here, what was your plan as far as board exams? Let's start with Nyah.
Yeah, so I think I offer a unique perspective because I am from BC. So BC was accepting the NBEO at that time.
Right.
And I initially didn't know what I wanted to do, if I wanted to do a residency, if I wanted to stay in the US, come back to Canada. It was a little bit up in the air, so I decided to keep all the doors open and just take the NBEO. And I thought, with my class, everyone will be kind of studying for the same thing. It makes sense with the timeline of the school. So I thought that would be the best, route of action for me. And then, unfortunately, my year is the last year that BC will be accepting the NBEO.
Right.
So I do feel sad for the year below me who have purchased their board's prep and now kind of have to decide if they're going to take just the OEBC or if they're going to take both. So it adds a layer of complexity to the situation.
Right. So this is kind of what I wanted to get a sense of, right? Because you're coming from different parts of the country. So you may have come to the school with different plans for how you were going to approach this. And so Nyah, your plan was just given the scope and what everything, the lay of the land was, you're going to do NBEO because it will allow you the opportunity to potentially work in the States if you want.
Yes.
But also you had a very clear path to come back to BC.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then Ewan, what about your case?
When I first came down here, I knew for sure at some point that I would end up back in Canada. And when Halifax or Nova Scotia didn't accept the NBEO, I knew I was going to write the OEBC at some point.
Right.
However, I just wasn't sure if I was going to try to stay in the States for a year after, potentially do a residency. So I was originally open to doing both when I first applied. As I progressed through and got to this point where we are now, I decided that maybe a residency isn't for me.
Okay.
And I do want to go back to Canada. So I ultimately decided to do the OEBC.
Got it. At what point along the path did you decide you were not doing the NBEO and only OEBC?
I think when it came upon us when they presented it to us last year.
Okay. So it's well before any of this stuff.
Well before, yeah.
Got it. And so now, how has this changed your path? It hasn't changed your path, I guess, Nyah, because you would be, like you said, the third year class is the last to be able to use NBEO as equivalent. If you could put yourself in the shoes of, I imagine you have friends in second year. If you could put yourself in their shoes, what do you see, let's say Nyah Miranda, who happens to be your equivalent of a Nyah Miranda who happens to be in second year. I know there's only one Nyah Miranda, but somebody else like yourself in second year who is from BC and was planning to do NBEO and come back to BC. How are their plans changing now, and what do you think they have to do?
Yeah, I think I would have to take a look at my situation and really think about if I wanted to stay in the US or not. I'm pretty certain now, after going through my 3 years, that I want to go back to Canada anyways. So if I had this knowledge in second year, I'd probably just do the OEBC, to be honest. Yeah. Especially, with the uncertainty that arises, maybe taking NBEO additionally, but I would definitely make sure I take OEBC as my number one, because I do, at the end of the day, want to come back home to Canada. So that would be priority number one for me.
Makes sense. So somebody who's in their second year, first year, if they're 100% set on coming back to Canada, well, let's just plan to do the OEBC and focus on that. But if they're getting to their third year and they're still not sure, they would, I assume, just have to do both now and kind of keep their options open.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a financial burden too. It's not cheap to take the NBEO, especially with the American dollars too. So there's also an investment that goes into buying 2 different prep sets too, because they are pretty different tests, without discussing the materials. They're just fundamentally different. So it's unfortunate. It makes it a lot more complicated for the students, but I'd say if you are undecided, you should try to think about doing both and managing that. And I think this upcoming class will kind of be trailblazers to this experience. So I hope, NECO and the regulatory boards are able to provide clarification and support to these students as they navigate this change.
Well, actually, it's a great segue. My next question was going to be to you. And then we can't dictate what anybody does. And I know NECO, after having spoken to Dr. Howard Purcell, is very open to feedback and input from students and alums and everybody. So what input would you give to NECO? How do you think NECO can support now second years who are trying to make these decisions? Or let's say they've decided, I'm only going to do OEBC. What support can NECO provide to that student who's studying in the USA and most other students around you are planning to take NBEO? What would you need from the school to help you?
I think just staying up to date with their, of course, they come up with policies and different things along the way. If NECO can stay up to date and be able to provide them with good information without the student have to dig in and really search for it themselves, and just being a good resource that way would be very helpful for Canadian students. And even just potentially providing a network of recent Canadian grads to get their input on.
Yeah, that's excellent. Specifically, I guess in that case, people have taken with regards to boards, people have taken the Canadian boards to provide them. I think that's really important. But I think even that's a really great point. If you're planning to go back to a certain province, are there NECO grads in that province that can just provide you with a little bit of a roadmap of what their journey was like and support? I think that's a really great answer. Anything you want to add to that, Nyah?
Yeah, just to add, I think it's important that NECO continues to advocate on behalf of its students to really put into perspective what the students are experiencing, because this is a lot of change that's going on. And, looking back, it might have been nice to have a grace period or a year of transition instead of imposing these drastic changes so quickly. So just going forward, how we can keep the well-being of the students in mind. And I think having voices like Dr. Purcell and Dean Weisberg speak on behalf of Canadian NECO students to these boards is really important. And that kind of is a funneling process through like chaos, getting student feedback, and then feeding up to the higher ups in NECO to make sure they're, giving the student perspective is super important.
Right. Absolutely.
I think there's two people specifically at NECO, Jill Cummins and Dr. Riley, have done a great job at giving us all the information about NBEO and OEBC. They're very accessible. They're very knowledgeable, and they're also putting on a cumulative practical for us in the coming 2 weeks.
Okay.
Just to try to simulate the environment of the part 2 or the part 3, just to get us used to what it's like being in maybe not an exam room clinical setting, but more of a testing facility.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just doing a great job at presenting us with everything we need to just prepare us.
So part 3 is the clinical, like you're in an exam room type setting and you have to do with a patient in front of you. Is that right? Or that's NBEO part 3?
Yeah.
So what's in for yourself? You're doing OEBC. So is that part of the OEBC as well?
It is, yes. But I'm pretty sure we don't do it I'm not sure if we do it on actual patients or if it's modelized. I think, again, they just changed a good portion of it.
Oh, I see.
So it'd be nice to figure out exactly with this cumulative practical, what to expect rather than going into a testing facility for a big exam and just having no idea.
Going into it blind.
Yeah, exactly.
So is whoever's taking OEBC this year, part 1, 2, is this the first time you guys will be the first people to experience this new version of the exam, or did they change it last year?
They changed it last year. We will be the second.
So there are some students or graduates who have taken it, the new version of it, that you could potentially speak to and learn from. Okay. Something else you wanted to share on that?
Yeah. So as you can tell, there's a lot of complexities and differences between the OEBC and the NBEO, but Dr. Riley and Jill did a really good job of breaking it all down for us. So we've had a couple different presentations during the evening where they go through all the different registration dates, the differences between the two exams, especially highlighting the OEBC for Canadians and the recent changes as well. So I think that's great that NECO's really been on top of it, informing us of all the changes and making sure we're well equipped to decide what we're going to do and be fully prepared going into the process.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really good to hear that they've been that thorough with it, not simply just updating you on what's happened, but actually helping you now prepare moving forward. Really quick change of pace. Did you know that it used to be NECO? Did you know that? How long ago was
Yes, I do remember.
Before I started.
When we met, you kept saying NECO.
Not me. Probably Sunny.
Like,
maybe Sunny.
Oh, yeah, maybe it was Sunny.
Sunny graduated a few years ahead of me.
Yeah.
And so I think when he was here, so early 2000s to mid 2000s, it was still NECO anyways. I don't know why all of a sudden that just came to mind. We keep saying NECO.
Yeah.
We still talk to some grads from a little bit earlier than my time, and they'll say NECO. All right. Along that this path of this kind of this conversation, Ewan, I think you had talked about briefly residency, and I wanted to just get your take on residency. 2 questions, and whoever wants to take it first. But are either of you planning on doing a residency? And B, then the longer part of that is, how did you come to that decision to do it or not to do it?
I am not doing it personally, and I think coming to that decision, optometry it's a lifelong learning profession. So when we get back to Canada and get on the job, you're going to have to continuously be learning and seeing cases. And it's not like your education stops as soon as you graduate. It keeps going. I think that sense for me was enough to get back to Canada and try to start practicing. I'm excited to start practicing as well.
Yep. That's fair. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Nyah?
And to add to that, I think one great thing about choosing your 4th year rotations, after getting a little taste of everything in 2nd and 3rd year with our community health centers and specialties that we rotate through, I was able to choose sites that I was more passionate about for 4th year. So I'm really interested in cornea and contact lens. So I chose a lot of sites that where I can see like scleral and GP contact lens patients. So I think that's a great thing too. You can kind of tailor your 4th year experience to something you're more passionate about. And speaking to a lot of, graduated students, that's like an adequate preparation for being a doctor and practicing back in Canada. And I also think another thing we can touch on is that residencies aren't as I guess, advertised in Canada as they are in the US.
True. Yeah.
So I believe you're not supposed to advertise yourself as a specialist in Canada, if I'm saying that correct.
Correct.
So in that sense, it kind of is a little bit discouraging to, spend another year working on this accreditation that you can't use back in Canada,
right,
when you can tailor your fourth year experience to focus on what you want. And also, as Ewan mentioned, continuing to learn with CE and different courses as you're a doctor, which I think is really important.
Those are all really good points. I think very valid points towards, why you chose not to pursue a residency. And you're absolutely right to just kind of echo what you're saying. If you choose your clinical fourth year sites intentionally, you can likely get a ton of hands-on experience in a specific area and help you feel comfortable enough to then apply that knowledge when you come back, go back home, wherever that might be. And again, you can always get trained in a lot of these spaces afterwards, whether it's CE or workshops and other things you can sign up for. Absolutely. If I was to kind of just devil's advocate and and to your point about specialty, that is a tricky. You're not allowed to call yourself a specialist. That term, unfortunately, specialist is reserved for medical specialists. A specialist, a retinal specialist or a glaucoma specialist. Optometrists are not, unfortunately, allowed to use that term as far as our practice goes. And I know thankfully there are people advocating on our behalf within our profession to change that vernacular a little bit. But for now, we can say that we specialize in a certain area or we offer specialty care services, but we can't call ourselves a specialist in a certain area. So that is important, and we have to kind of be careful how we word it. And there are relatively new organizations coming up in Canada that are helping Canadian optometrists get certified and be, at least be able to call ourselves like certified in a certain space within a Canadian organization, sort of equivalent to your academy in the USA type of deal. All right. Now, if I can, I did not do my residency either, but I still, to play devil's advocate, I think there can be a big benefit to those who do pursue a residency if you are intentional about which residency it is and how it's then going to apply wherever you go back to practice. I think a decade ago, if somebody did a glaucoma residency, I'm not sure it would have been all that useful in BC. Now, it can be more useful, and we have our colleagues back home who are specializing more in glaucoma, and we're able to bill for it and test for it and all these kinds of things. And contact lens, cornea, anterior segment, these are things that are more applicable back home. Yeah. So if you were to do a residency in those areas, I think it still can translate and may benefit that person when they go back home as far as what job they get as an associate doctor or if they open up their own practice, things like that. So I think there's arguments on both sides, but I think, it's really great to see that you guys have thought it through and you're intentional with your decision making. I certainly can't say that I was when I was in your position. I was just like, I'm just going to go back home and work. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. That's the great thing about our profession, though. One shoe doesn't fit all. Some people, will be great in a residency if you're really passionate about a super niche topic like vision therapy. That can certainly be beneficial coming back to Canada. And I think, the same path can't be for everyone. So these are our specific paths, but that doesn't mean that doing a residency is wrong or not doing a residency is wrong. It's really about the individual and what path you choose to pursue.
That's beautiful. Thank you for putting it so eloquent. You should become a podcast host. You're better at it.
No.
And I'm not
there's enough
joking.
Podcasts and podcasters in my family.
In your family. I was going to say there's never enough podcasts, but there's already one in your family. Still, there's room for more.
Shout out Trevor.
Yeah, shout out to Dr. Trevor Miranda. And the Optometry Unleashed podcast.
Yes,
he's great. Trev's good on any mic or any camera. It doesn't matter what the format is. Okay, moving on from So thanks for the input on the residency. I want to talk a little bit more. Just zoom out a little bit to NECO again and Canadian students. What have you felt? How have you felt NECO has helped Canadian students to feel at home here? In Boston, in the United States? Are there certain programs? Are there certain events? What have you seen or been a part of?
Yeah, so we have a chaos chapter here at NECO. It's the Canadian Club, and we have, I think, over 140 members. So it's one of the biggest...
At NECO?
At NECO.
Wow.
One of the most active clubs on campus, and I'm lucky enough to be a part of the leadership group there. So we host a lot of great events throughout the year. We connect students through our school and also with our extensive Canadian alumni network. We host different events, like we had Canadian Thanksgiving this year. which we were able to host all the students, have some turkey dinner, and, a lot of students weren't able to go home for the holidays. So just little events like that to make our students feel more at home here is really great.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Chaos Club is kind of a big thing. Like, a lot of Americans come up to me and they're like, "Hey, Nyah, can I join Chaos?" Like, we have a fun time. We have great dinners. We have great events. So I love being a part of Chaos. It's something I'm super passionate about.
That's really amazing. We'll talk a bit more about Chaos in a second, but Canadian Thanksgiving is an awkward time, right? If you go to school in the States, because isn't it around like midterms and stuff like that? Is it close to?
Yeah, I think it felt like right before midterms or something like that.
It's tough. It was, and we didn't really get down here, we didn't get time off for it, right? So, our families are back celebrating, but it's nice that NECO does put on the Canadian Thanksgiving for it. It kind of allows us to all get together and feel like Canadian family.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And 40 students part of Chaos at NECO alone is incredible. It's amazing, really cool to hear, and mind-blowing because, again, back in my day, Chaos was much, much, much smaller, or whatever it was called, if it was called Chaos back then, or it was the Canadian Students Club or whatever it was. I remember being part of it, and I remember 2 or 3 people who were really advocating for it and really trying to lead it, but it was still a very small thing. So it's really cool to hear how much it's grown. And how much more support there is for Canadians. Tell me more about getting involved with Chaos, or just being more. Let's start with Chaos, but I want to go to just being involved on a broader in a broader picture at school, in whether it's the NECO community or in Boston. So let's start with Chaos, and we'll go from there.
So to start, we have a clubs fair at the start of every year. So as a first year coming in, I knew initially I should probably be a part of the Canadian Club because there's so many clubs on campus, but they have a really strong group there in Chaos. And I felt like they welcomed me in, and I got to know students of all different years as well, because you tend to just kind of stay in your own year if you don't join these clubs. So
that's true.
Having the perspective of the upper years was super helpful in navigating my career here at NECO, because I was able to kind of hear their hindsight, and that was really helpful. And, a lot of them, what paths they chose, what rotations, where they want to go back to practice in Canada. And I think this was super important for me because I wanted to stay connected with the Canadian population while studying in the US, because these will be colleagues one day. So this was my way to kind of stay connected to my colleagues while studying in America. And yeah, it was just it was a great experience.
That's really good.
Yeah, club fair. It all started at club fair.
Did they have club fair back then? So this is great. There's like newer things that are happening that are helping students to be more involved. Ewan, are you part of Chaos?
I am part of Chaos. I'm not part of the leadership of Chaos, but I am a member, and I go to almost all of the events. They are fantastic.
That's good to hear. Yeah. How do you feel like it's benefited your time here at NECO?
Moving down here, not really knowing anybody I came down here with, I felt like joining this, and everybody's very outgoing, very nice, very welcoming. So just as a friend group, people to lean on, Chaos was great to offer that. And they give a lot of insight to things going on back in Canada that someone in first or second year optometry school maybe wouldn't have as much exposure to. Right. Now they get to hear these things and hear from different industry partners and really give a good sense of what is happening back home.
That's really good. Really good. So I think for any prospective students who may be potentially watching this coming to NECO, or if there's other students here who are not part of it, Chaos, I would recommend it. It seems like it's something that really provides a lot of support. So that's really great. Let's change gears a little bit. I want to talk about scope expansion. I know this back home, and whenever you guys do come back home, whether it's Nova Scotia or BC, you're going to start to hear more of these conversations if you haven't already. This term scope expansion, we're trying to change the terminology a little bit to scope modernization or scope optimization, just because it sounds a little bit more friendly and just more positive. First of all, have you heard much talk about this while you're here at NECO? Have you heard much of this happening back home?
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty popular topic. However, it's hard to find out a lot of details regarding it when you're not, when you're a student, not part of your provincial college.
Okay, got it. Yeah. How about you, Nyah?
Yeah, so I joined the BCDO as a student, so I'm subscribed to their monthly newsletter. So I get a little bit of information on the proposals for scope modernization in BC. So it's nice to be aware of that. But as a NECO student, I had the opportunity to go to the Massachusetts State House and with the MSO. and be able to actually speak to legislators about pertinent bills that involve optometry and educating them on our profession. So I think that was a really great opportunity as a student, kind of a unique opportunity that NECO provided for me, because I think it's important to be aware of the scope expansion and the state of optometry in the U.S. because the U.S. is almost like leading this expansion. Canada tends to follow it.
Right.
So being aware of these changes will certainly be helpful as I transition back to Canada. And I think another thing to recognize too is our curriculum is taught to the highest level of scope expansion in the US. So we are fully trained at the highest level, injections and lasers and minor procedures. So we are fully educated in this, and we can be prepared to practice to these standards when the scope is expanded in Canada.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. That definitely puts us at an advantage studying in the US here.
Absolutely. It does. It's really good. A lot of credit to NECO for the training, the level of training that you're coming out of school with. Absolutely, the term education before legislation, right? So we need to be able to show legislators that we are trained to this level. So you're coming out of school trained to the fullest level. But to the fact that you also have had the experience to go to the State House.
Yeah, the Massachusetts State House.
Yeah.
It was great. I think just educating, senators on our profession, because a lot of people don't know the medical aspects of optometry and all that we can diagnose and treat as optometrists. So that's a great experience. And also just for students to realize that, these legislators and senators are just people like us too. It's not scary at all. So I feel confident as a, graduating doctor that I'll be able to continue my passion for advocacy by maybe being a part of the BCDO and continuing this scope modernization and practice that I hope the profession continues to grow in that direction. And just being a part of it in whatever way I can, having this experience that NECO provided me will be great for the future.
I think that will be hugely, hugely valuable for you. And just having the exposure to it in general is going to be hugely valuable. We need that. When you go back to work, whether it's Nova Scotia, BC, Ontario, wherever, you need that passion for the profession to want to advocate. And then if you have that under your belt as a little bit of experience already, it's going to be hugely valuable to you.
It comes back to, best serving our patients. If we have the ability to treat these conditions and provide this care for our patients, it's a disservice to them to not be able to provide these services, especially in rural communities. Like I'm from a rural area on Vancouver Island where a lot of these resources aren't available. So hoping that this will change in the future.
Yeah, well, that's definitely the first step. Amazing, guys. This has been a really great conversation. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of you coming out of lab or whatever you're doing and coming here to chat with me. And this is, it's not just for students. This is also for our colleagues out there, optometrists, wherever you're practicing, get a look at the current students and what they're doing and what they're learning, and get, if you can get more involved with your school, whether it's NECO or Waterloo or wherever you might have gone to school, help current students to really get the training to the fullest level, but understand, have more enthusiasm for the profession. So when they come out of school, like Nyah and Ewan are two perfect examples of come out of school and want to advocate for the profession. So if you're watching this or listening to this, call your school up and say, hey, I'm an alum. I'd love to help. I'd love to connect with the students. I'd love to give them, even if it's just give them a bit of your time to talk to them about, what it's like to practice wherever you live. So when they come back from the States, they want to come back to Saskatchewan or wherever because they know more about it and they have their questions answered. Like Ewan saying, when they're sitting here, they don't always have, Nyah's had the luxury of having the BCDO communicating with her, but not every student has that. So somebody from Nova Scotia could chat with Ewan and others and let them see what the scope of optometry is like back home. Any final, a little bit of a soapbox moment for me. Any final words? I want to give you guys a minute or two each to just share thoughts about your time here at NECO and optometry in general. Any final words of wisdom, whatever you'd like to share. I'll start with you, Ewan.
I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody at NECO. My time here, I've learned so much valuable information that I'd say enjoyed it. And just, it's nice to be able to be educated to the highest standard and take that to pioneer optometry heading back up north. Love that.
Yeah, I would say if you come to NECO as a student, definitely take advantage of all the different opportunities here. I feel like NECO has so many different clubs, so many different organizations, so many different paths that you can pursue. And it's really about what you make of the profession. And, I think what we need is a lot of passionate students that are willing to advocate for our profession, are excited about the future. And yeah, if you're a prospective student, like don't be afraid to reach out to me or Ewan or any other students at NECO. I feel like that's how you get the best advice, like the tea about the school, so to speak, or just reach out to students. Also, doctors are helpful too, but like if you reach out to people that are at the school currently, they can give you like the best insight as to what it's like. But I've certainly enjoyed my experience here. It's not over yet, and I'm really grateful for the support that NECO has provided to me as a Canadian and also as a student.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Both of you have provided such great insight into the current student life and the changes that are happening and all of that. So thank you very much for taking the time. And I want to say big thanks to NECO for having me here and allowing the students to be on the podcast and having this amazing setup and all of this. Obviously, I have very, very fond memories of being a student here as well and my time in Boston. So I'm really grateful to NECO for all of that. And thank you to everybody who's watching and listening to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I'll see you guys in the next episode.